Hey friend, welcome back to the Friend Zone. We are now on episode 4, and I'm so grateful that you keep coming back to hang out with me here. But before we get started, make sure that you like and subscribe. And while you're at it, head over to Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram and follow me at NowFriend89. So, friend, it's story time. Let me tell you about my very own Jonah experience, okay? So last week I got invited to a girls trip to Miami. My friend is getting married. Congratulations to her. And so we went. She planned a girls trip for all of her friends, various friends. I didn't exactly know all of the ladies. I had met a couple in passing and some I had never met before. And so she planned a girls trip for all of her friends. Her bridal party is who it was. And so we went out to Miami last week and had a blast. But before we got there, right, I had to fly. I had to fly into Miami. And so, you get to the airport, you should get there about 2 hours or so in advance. And so I did that, right? But even before I even get to the airport, like my husband and I were kind of having a bit of a disagreement. And so I was like, I'm gonna go on vacation. I don't want to be bothered. Like, this is it. This is what it's gonna be. So I'm out here, right? Like I'm going on vacation. And so when I'm planning to go, I'm packing my bags and all of that stuff. And God said to me, uh, make it right with your husband before you go. And so I was cool with that because I don't really like to travel anyways, with being on bad terms or whatever. So I went to him to kind of make things right and get on good terms before I left. And he wasn't having it. Like he was not receiving what I had to say. He was still mad. He was still upset. It was late. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I had a flight to catch at like 8. I still needed to be finishing packing and do my checklist. Like I had so much stuff to do. And so I gave it a good solid try for about an hour, maybe a little longer. And then I was like, all right, I tried. Like, Lord, you told me to make it right. I tried to make it right. He don't want to make it right. That's between you and him. So I was like, all right, I'm back. I'm gone. I'm packing my bags and I'm about to go on my trip and enjoy and leave him here to his thoughts and his devices. And so I packed my bag and everything. Now, mind you, typically when I go on a trip, my husband always takes me to the airport. Like I have not ever driven myself. Maybe rode with a friend or something like that. But in terms of if I'm going to the airport, like he always takes me to the airport. So he mad. So I'm like, I don't need him. I'm gonna take myself to the airport and do this little parking thing and park my car and all of that stuff because whatever. I'm just gonna leave him where he at. And so I go and I don't even book the thing that night because I'm still like really kind of hoping that we can make up and then I can get him to take me to the airport that morning. And so I didn't even book it that night. So I set my alarm to get up, snooze the alarm for just 10 minutes, right? Like what is 10 minutes gonna hurt? Because I was up late packing and all of that stuff. So so I snoozed the alarm for 10 minutes, get up, get ready, um, drag my own bags to the car. Listen, it's crazy. I drag my own bags to the car because I never do that, right? Like he always load the car for me, take my bags, all of that stuff, right? Like so I love my own bags because I'm in that I don't need them mode, right? I can do it all by myself. So load my bags up and go to the car, and then I pull the car out, and then I remember, oh snap, I didn't book my parking, right? Because I was still kind of holding on to a little hope that he would be chill, we could make up, and I could go to the airport without no problem. Like he would take me or whatever, and we'd be all good, right? Run off into the sunset, blah blah. So, um, so yeah, so I get out the car and I'm trying to book it, and then it says that I can't book it for a certain time frame, which I need to be at the airport and parked at certain times so I can get through security and all of that stuff. And so again, I've never done this myself. And so I'm just kind of like winging it or whatever. So I'm like, all right, I'm gone. So I book it, get to the airport. Now, in the thing, in the small print, it says 8 minutes from the time, there's a shuttle that says 8 minutes from the time you park your car to the time that we take you to your gate, right? So I'm there at the thing. I parked my car, and I see a lady across the street. Now the shuttles have the gates on them. Like I was going to the terminal. It has a terminal on it. I was going to Terminal C. This particular shuttle had Terminal D on it. So I didn't get on. The lady across the way from me that parked across the way, she got on. And so she gets on and the shuttle drives off. So I'm waiting. It's cool in the morning. So I'm waiting and waiting. It gets cold. I get back in the car. The shuttle comes back. I get on, and it's the lady across the way from me. She's on the shuttle, and I'm like, what are you doing still on here or whatever? And she was like, oh, he was driving around, I guess, looking for more people. So it just keeps taking a long time, right? Like everything just keeps going wrong. The guy that's driving the shuttle is like circling the parking lot finding people, even though in the small print it says 8 minutes from the time that you park your car to the time we take you to your terminal to get on your plane or whatever. So we're driving, and so finally we're off, like going to the thing, and then he stops to help this random man that looks lost. And I'm just like, oh my God, like I need to go. So the time is just being eaten away, right? So I got to the airport maybe about maybe like an hour and a half ish early before my plane departed. And so
And don't forget to tell them that you tried. I tried to make up for you left.
he finally starts driving and sees this old. I don't know if the man was old enough. I didn't see the man. He sees this man wandering. He looked lost. I'm assuming because he stopped and said, "Hey, you need help?" Like I heard the driver say that. So he's like, "Yes." So he gets stops the shuttle, gets off, and talks to the man for like 5 minutes. So at this point, like I'm 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes away from departure. So I'm like, so when he gets back on the bus, I'm like, hey, I need to get to my gate. And so he's like, oh, yeah, 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 sorry, sorry. So he starts driving me to the gate or whatever. And so I get to the gate, get out now. This is DFW Airport. I have flown out of DFW Airport. I don't even know how many times. I've never been in security for more than like 10 or 15 minutes. 30-minute wait at security today. And so I'm waiting in line at security. I'm like steady checking my watch, like, oh my God. Like, and I'm getting the notifications from my app saying, your plane is now boarding. And so I'm like, oh my God, like hurry up, hurry up. So I'm going through security. I do all the things. I know how to fly, so I should have no problems with my bags or whatever. I don't have any liquids, no nothing, right? So I should be good. So I go through security, and my rolling bag is cool. My rolling carry-on bag is cool, but I also take a personal item that's a decent size, and I take this same set every time I travel. Like the size is not a problem, none of that. So then my bag comes through, and the guy stops my personal item bag, and he's like, "Oh, I need to run it back through, right?" So literally, like in my mind, I feel like he pulled the bin out and leaned on the machine and was whistling or something. I'm like, put the bag back in, bro. Put it in the x-ray. Let's go. And so he goes in, finally takes it down to the end, runs the bag again. It comes out no problem. So get my stuff or whatever. And I was talking to the lady on the shuttle. She was really chilling. She was like, yeah, I got TSA pre-check and all of that. Do you have that? And I was like, no, I don't have it, but I'm getting it. Okay. Believe I'm getting pre-check after this experience. And so I'm talking to her, and she's like, oh, you kind of late, ain't you? And I'm like, well, I think I'll make it. Like, I do this all the time, da, da, da. And so she's like, yeah, okay, good luck. And so she was on the phone. So I walked by her at Chick-fil-A. And so when I walked by her, I'm like, I made it. And I walk by, I'm running by to my gate. And so when I get to my gate, The gate still open. I run up, it says boarding closed or something like that. And so I ran up and I had my ticket because the door was still open. So I'm like, oh, I can still board. The door's still open. I still got my ticket. It's now 8:10. My flight left at 8:25. Was scheduled to leave at 8:25. So I run up to the door, show the man my ticket and say, "Hey, I have a ticket for this flight." And so he was like, "Oh, no, you already been dropped from the flight." Like he didn't even look in my direction. He didn't. He was just like, "Nah, you already been dropped." And I was like, "What?" Like the gate's still open. But then he proceeds to call names of people sitting in the area for standby seats. And so I'm floored at this point. I'm like, "Hey, you calling standby people? But I have a ticket to this flight." And so he was like, "It doesn't matter. You've already been dropped. You get dropped automatically 15 minutes before departure." Which I've never heard of this before. And so I'm like, so I look down when he says that. I look down, it's literally 8:10 on the dot. So that's exactly 15 minutes before my plane is set to depart, right? So I'm like, so what do I do now? And so he's like, you have to go down to gate 25, which is American Airlines customer service, and tell them like, what's happening and then see if they can get you on another flight. So I'm like, I'm looking at the time, like by the time I do that, like there's basically I'm accepting the fact that there's no way that I'm about to get on this particular flight. And so I go down, the line is long, like just all the things that I'm seeing that day at the airport, I never seen before. The line was crazy long in customer service, and so apparently, so I'm flying to Miami, and then if you know or if you don't know, like Miami and Fort Lauderdale airports are about 20 minutes apart, so you can fly into either of those airports and get to Miami, and so apparently they had canceled the flight to Fort Lauderdale um that morning. And so all the people that were in line, they were in line for Fort Lauderdale. So that decreases my chances of getting a flight to Miami, getting a standby seat, right? But I'm like, all right, whatever. I don't find it out really until I'm in line and I start talking to people and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, the Fort Lauderdale flight got canceled, right? So then the Miami flight also got canceled. So I get a ticket. I'm in line. I'm trying everything though. I called American Airlines. I talked to the AI chat on American Airlines website. Like I'm in the long line. Like it's long. Like it's all the way snaked and then it starts going down the aisle. Like it's so long. And so I'm in the line. So I'm just trying these different things while I'm in the line to see if I can get a resolution before I get to the person at the front because the line's so long. And so I try all of these different things and nothing. Like the AI things just stopped responding. Like it was just like chat dropped for no reason. Like the lady on the phone was like, you have to talk to somebody in the airport. And I'm like, the line is so long. Like, is there any way I could talk to the supervisor there or whatever? And so then she puts me on hold and then the call drops. Like it was just craziness. It was a madhouse. And so I was just so frustrated. So by the time all of that happened, like I get to the front. And then when I get to the front, the guy's like, I'm gonna just be honest with you. I don't have any seats available for today. Um but I have a standby. I can put you on standby and basically it's like basically what happened to you may happen to someone else and you could get put on a standby flight. But really it's not a guarantee. And so then that's when he tells me that the Miami flight after mine has been canceled. So I had an 8:25 flight. There was another flight at 10 something. That flight got canceled. The Fort Lauderdale flight got canceled. And then the West Palm Beach flight got canceled. So all flights going into Florida were not all flights. The next flights going into Florida had been canceled. And so he was like, I'm just gonna be honest, like the chances of you getting standby on one of these flights is slim to none. It's just you just had bad luck today. So I'm like, you are kidding me, right? So I'm not panicking yet. So I'm chilling. Like I got to the airport maybe at like 6:45 or something. Like I parked at the airport at 6:45, so I stayed there until like 12 or 1 o'clock. And so I stayed at the airport until about 12 or 1, and like the flight, I'm sitting there, and the flight that I'm on standby on, I'm sitting in the gate area, so I everything's cool. I look up and then see that it turned red, the time, and so when the time turns red, it means the flight is delayed. And so I'm looking like, okay, what time is the flight delayed for? It's delayed by 2 hours. So I already been there at this point for 6 hours almost. And so I'm like, all right, I'm not probably finna wait on it because I don't even have a guaranteed seat at this point. Like I'm waiting for a possible seat because I'm on standby because I don't have a seat. And so I go back to the customer service. The line is still long. And the guy said this morning, he was like, if you don't get on the standby flight, don't worry. Like, this is totally unusual for our line to be this long. Like, it's never like this. And he goes on this tangent, like, while he's, setting up my standby flight about how unusual this is. And so he's like, so this won't be like this afternoon. Just come back in line and we'll get you fixed up and blah, blah, freaking blah. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So I go back. The line is still long. It's still long because all of the flights to Miami are either canceled or really delayed. And so everybody's in the same boat, like trying to figure out what's going on. So I get back in the long line. And so when I get in the line this time, I try American Airlines on the phone again to see if I can get some help in resolution. She says the same thing, like, oh, you need to talk to someone at the airport. I'm like, can I talk to someone here on this phone? Because the line is so long, and this is my second time in line. Like, please help me. And so she goes and she's like, okay, I've been approved to move your flight. I have a flight tomorrow out of Dallas, and it leaves at 6 p.m. You'll get in at 9 p.m. Well, now at that point, I've missed a day and a half of my trip, and they was getting a yacht the next day, and I didn't want to miss the yacht. Okay, the yacht was early in the day, so I'm like, no, really? Like, oh my gosh, like, is there any other flight or whatever? And so she's like, I'm looking. And then she's like, okay, look, I got one for 10. I just had a flight come up for 10. There's one seat. Do you want it? It can go at any time. I'm like, what time I'm getting in? She said, you'll get in about 1, I think, on Florida time, whatever Florida's time is. And so you can get that seat. And I was like, yes, give it to me. So she books me for the flight or whatever at 10 tomorrow. So then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just go home and make up with my husband like God told me to do. Cause at this point I'm like did all the flights going to like literally every flight within any type of distance of Miami was canceled or extremely delayed and had no seats. And so I'm like, did this really happen just because I didn't want to make up with my husband? Like, I just needed to make up with him, make things right before I go. And I had been talking to him like, babe, you're not gonna believe this. This is what's going on. Like, I feel like Jonah. I feel like everybody in this airport, that flight got canceled and delayed because I didn't want to obey. So I said all of that to say that our topic of discussion today is now, friend, obey. So that's my Jonah story, right? And so I think I was struggling, so I ended up going home talking to my husband, like we had really kind of already made up on the phone because we were laughing about it. I wasn't even like, even though I was mad, I was pissed on the inside. Like I wanted to just raw, just like tear up everything. I was so mad. And so, but I was like, it just wasn't even coming out just because I was just like, this, I needed to go home and make up with my husband anyway. So I went home, talked to my husband or whatever. He's like, come, he was like on the phone, like, just come home, babe. Like the whole time, even when I was waiting on my standby flight, he was like, just come home, let's talk and all of that kind of stuff and whatever. So I came home, made up with my husband. We talked and laughed and kikied and apologized and all of that kind of stuff because we was both being stubborn. And so then I just stayed home. He was like, I'm gonna take you to the airport in the morning and all of that kind of stuff. And so he brought me to the airport and got my bags out. It just felt like normal. So my flight was at 10. He took me to the airport at 7 on a Friday morning. No traffic. Like, we got straight to the airport. It wasn't no delays, nothing. Like, I woke up, I had made him breakfast and stuff. Like, I was just like, it was just a great day. Like, it was just good. It just felt good. It felt right. And so he took me to the airport, drove me to the airport, no traffic. We get to the airport. Um, and pull straight up to the gate, no issues. Walk in, I kid you not. Now, this has also never happened to me in DFW. There was not a single soul in front of me in security, and I got pictures. So I'll see if I can put the picture somehow in the video when I'm editing or whatever. But like, there was not a single solitary soul in front of me. In security, like, I walked straight through security. So now I'm at the airport at like 7:30, and there's no one there, and so I get through security, and I'm sitting at my gate with like an hour's time to spare. And so I got to the airport with at about the same time range. I probably got there a little bit earlier because that day I was like, I cannot miss this flight. And so, like, I'm sitting there and I'm at the gate. Like, I'm at the gate. So I called my husband after I got in and got situated, and I'm just like, you're not gonna believe this. Like, there was nobody in front of me, and there, like, in the security or whatever. And so as I'm sitting there talking to him, like, literally I'm telling him the story about how there was nobody, and then God had spoke to me and was like, this is how doors will open up for you when you are in my perfect will. Now I'm boohoo crying in the airport. Like, I'm just like, these people gonna think I'm crazy. I'm crying. Because I was just like, all I had to do initially was obey. Like, this is what God had said. And I know on the first episode I had talked about that I wanted to start practicing radical obedience. And listen, God's like, I'm gonna show you. We're gonna see if you're practicing radical obedience. But to me, I'm like, as long as I try, like, I can't force him to make up with me. So, like, God, that's on him, but that's not the instruction that God gave. The instruction that God gave was to make it right with my husband. And so I thought, just because I gave it an effort, that I was cool and I was in the clear, but that wasn't the instruction that I was given. And so I just think, we have to be reminded that we need to follow the instruction, and there's a reason for God to give us those instructions and stuff like that. And so that was my Jonah story of what happened at the airport. And so, to give a little bit of backstory about Jonah, just in case anybody's not familiar with the story, Jonah was a prophet in the Bible. God asked him to go and prophesy to a city that was evil city. They weren't living right. They were a sinful city, and God asked him to go and prophesy to that city. And he was like, "No, the city is bad. I ain't doing it. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, why you want me to do that? All of that stuff." And so then Jonah ran, and so in the opposite direction of the city, got on a boat. While he was on the boat, God sent a storm. And when he sent the storm, like, the people on the boat was like, why is this storm happening? Like, what's going on? All of that kind of stuff. And so God revealed to them that it was Jonah. Jonah was the reason that they was causing the storm. And so they threw Jonah overboard. And so they threw Jonah overboard and threw him into the ocean. And when he got thrown into the ocean, he gets swallowed up by a whale. And so when he gets swallowed up by the whale, like, he's in the whale for 3 days, and then he finally is like, okay, I'll go to Nineveh, let me out. And so the whale spits up Jonah, and then he goes to Nineveh, but he's still kicking and screaming. Okay, and so if you know me, you know my story is kicking and screaming. So Jonah's still kicking and screaming all the way. He don't want to go. All of this kind of stuff, and then eventually he does go to Nineveh. And so, but in that story though, the people surrounding Jonah and associated with him were suffering because he didn't obey, right? Like the people on the boat, like they thought they were going to die because he wasn't obeying. And so there's a story in the Bible for Saul, a story about Saul. It's in First Samuel chapter 15. And so I'll read a little bit of that. I didn't want to read the Jonah story because it's long, but there's a whole book of Jonah in the Bible if you would like to go and read that. But I will read this scripture from First Samuel. And so Saul, just a little backstory, gets crowned king. The Israelites ask for a king. God says they don't need a king. They wanted a king. God gives them a king. He chooses Saul. Okay. So now Saul is the newly crowned king of the Israelites, which are God's chosen people. And so verse 1, so First Samuel chapter 15, verse 1, English Standard Version says, and Samuel said to Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people Israel. Now, therefore, listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction that all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Jesus. And then jump down to verse 13. And Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed be you to the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. And Samuel said, What then is the bleating of sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen that I hear? Saul said, They have brought them from the Amalekites for the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God, and the rest we have devoted to destruction. Then Samuel said to Saul, Stop, I will tell you what the Lord said to me this night. And he said to him, Speak. And Samuel said, Though you are little in your own eyes, are you not the head of the tribe of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and the Lord sent you on a mission and said, Go, devote to destruction the sinners, the Amalekites, and the fight against them until they are consumed. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you pounce on the spoil and do what was evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me. I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have devoted the Amalekites to destruction. But the people took of the spoil sheep and oxen, then the best of the things devoted to destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. And Samuel said, Has the Lord great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? In other words, do you think he wants your sacrifice instead of obedience? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. For rebellion is the sin of divination, and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the cost of sacrificing obedience. And so kind of going back to my own story of, how I missed a day of vacation. Like, and possibly because my friends were traveling, some of my friends, some were friends and some were, associates that were going on a trip, like their flights were canceled as well. Like there is a cost associated with our obedience. And so if we sacrifice our obedience because maybe we don't see it as important, right? Maybe it's something like, oh Lord, I don't have time to do that right now, but I will do it later. Maybe I don't have the money, I don't have the finances, I don't have the means, I don't know how, I don't have the time. All of these excuses, right, that we would give so that we don't have to obey what God has instructed us to do. There is a cost associated with every second that is sacrificed. And so we have to be mindful of that, right? Like just because I don't think I'm thinking, oh, okay, yeah, God said to make things right with my husband, and thank God that I had the opportunity to make things right with my husband, right? Like I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know if I'll be able to come back from the trip and make up with him because that was my thought. That was my thought. Like he mad, he'll get over it. We'll be fine, and then we'll move on. But I don't know that to be true. I don't know that to be a fact. And so, but my priority should be to make sure that my things are right in my home first before I am off traveling and having a great time. And so to many that may seem small and minuscule, but to God that is something greater. And so I'm grateful to him for his grace, honestly, in this moment, because I had the opportunity to come home and make things right with my husband and all of that kind of stuff. And he showed up for us. Like he showed up for us mightily in that moment. Um and so for in this case for Saul, he was instructed to go. He was going out to carry out God's vengeance. Like he was doing what he was instructed to go and do what God said to do, but he took it in his own hands. He did what he saw was right in his own eyes, and Samuel even said, like, do you think that he prefers a sacrifice over you listening to what he said? Because God is the Alpha and the Omega. So he's the beginning and the end. He knows what happens before, he knows what's going to happen after. He can see around the corner when we can't. And so there is a cost associated with us not obeying his word and what he is instructing us to give. And so one of my points for that is that your obedience is tied to someone else's freedom. And so we think about the instructions that God gives us and we think, it doesn't mean anything, it's not important. But if your obedience is to give someone a word from God, or your obedience is to do something to make up with your husband, like, you know what I'm saying? Like that is a sacrifice that God is asking you to give, and it is tied to someone else's freedom. Like I don't know what space my husband is in. I don't know what space that I'm in, or the people that he's gonna encounter. Like it's such a trickle down effect. Like we think it's so small, but it's a major occurrence, like because everything in the world is connected like a puzzle piece. So like if he goes to work and goes off tomorrow, I go on the trip and go off, or I'm in a bad headspace, like all of that is connected to the fact that I got an attitude with my husband at home. Like, and so you want to make sure that you are prioritizing your obedience to God, because he doesn't prioritize anything else over that. So even though Saul had a good intention of sacrificing the animals that he had gotten from that land from the Amalekites, even though he had a good intention of, like, I'm gonna make this sacrifice before God, like this is a great thing, you know what I'm saying? Even though that's not what God said. So that is not what God said. He said, I want you to go and spare nothing, kill everybody, kill everything. And so he's like, well, he decided, I have a better idea. I'm going to go and make this sacrifice to God with the best of these animals. And so Saul said, I'm gonna go and make this sacrifice to God. I'm gonna sacrifice these animals because I saved the best of the animals, right? But I want to say that our good intention does not purify disobedience. Like it doesn't make it better because I have a good intention, right? Like I had a good intention to go upstairs and make up with my husband, but I didn't succeed in that. And so because I didn't succeed in it, I was like, bah, I'll do it later. Like I gotta go, I gotta get packed. It was already late. So that doesn't purify my disobedience, like as the result showed. Like all the flights was canceled. I couldn't get a connecting flight to a city close to Miami so I could try to drive. Like there was no, like the lady was like, everything's out. The one lady said it's completely zeroed out. Like I asked the flight attendant at the gate and she's like, it's completely zeroed out. Like there's no flights going to Florida, to any of the cities today, any of the airports in Florida today. They're all gone. All the seats are gone. So just because you have a good intention, it does not mean that that your actions get purified because you disobey God. And so I was watching this podcast. I think it was Jay Z. He was on Kevin Hart's podcast, and he said, people think that knowing and doing are really close together, but in reality, like knowing and doing are miles apart sometimes. And so it's like you know what to do, you get the instructions on what to do, but do you always do it? Like like people know that you shouldn't steal, right? Like you're raised to know and understand that you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't do these things, but people do it. Like you shouldn't speed on the highway. You know it's against the law. You know you could get hurt. You know you could have a wreck. You know it's dangerous, but you do it. So you do know better. Because people say you if you know better, you'll do better. Do you though? Like, do you really? Because we know it's a known fact that people get in car accidents every day. People get don't come home to their families every day because of car accidents. Like speeding gets you tickets, get your license revoked. Like there are consequences associated with these things, and you know them. You know in your heart of hearts, but you think I'm late to work, so I get a pass to speed, or I get a pass to break the law, or I don't have any money, so I get a pass to steal. Like that's not the same, like you don't get a pass. So you do in fact know better. You do in fact know that stealing is wrong. You do in fact know that speeding is wrong. You do in fact know that cheating in your marriage is wrong. You do in fact know that cheating on your taxes is wrong. Like you do know these things are wrong. But if you think that you can slide by, then you go ahead and do it anyway. But so you do know better, but you don't do better. So if you know better, you'll do better. That's not a real statement, because knowing and doing are so far apart. So I think the best thing that we can do is know and honor and trust God and His intentions for us in our life, because He knows what's best for us, right? I have another story about my job and how I started working at my current company. Um, so I was at my old company, and I was over it. Like I was over it. I was tired of working there. It was really micromanaging, and I was just like feeling like a child. I didn't want to feel like a child. I didn't want to feel, you know, I just didn't want to feel like that no more. So I went and found another. So I started looking. I started looking for another job. Ended up getting a job offer. It was a raise from my current job for about $2. So I was getting a $2 raise. It was another company. I heard the company was great to work with. I knew people that worked there. They spoke highly of the company, all of that, right? So I'm excited. So I put my notice in. Um, I'm ready. I'm ready to move on to the next chapter or whatever. So I'm going through my 2 weeks, and I get another job offer. Well, it's at my current company. So we'll call them company number two and company number one. So at my current company, which is company number two, um, I go to the interview. I hadn't got a job offer yet. I hadn't had an interview, but I had applied. And so I applied to another role, and the recruiter called and said, "Well, I think you'd be a great fit for this role," which I had seen the role, but I didn't think I met the qualifications. And so I didn't apply for it. I applied for something that was more within my work experience and my skills. And so apply for that. She called me and said, "I think you should apply for this." And so I was like, "All right, if you think I fit, like, I'll give it a try." Like I had already had a job offer, so I wasn't really tripping. But I never turned down interviews. It's like my career journey. Like I just never turned down interviews. So anytime I get an interview, I always take all of them. So I went to the interview, whatever. And I ended up getting a job. I got the job offer. It was less than my current job at. I mean, it was less than my current job offer. So the job offer from job number one. So it was less than that. So I negotiated, and they said, "Hey, this is the max we can give for this role. Would you be willing to take it?" And so I'm like, but it was less. It was probably about like a dollar 50 less than job number one. Well, now my work experience says to get your money up front, because if you don't get your money up front, they will penny pinch you throughout the rest of the time, so then you don't get as much for your raises, right? Like that's what my job history has said. And so I was like, I didn't really want to take it for less. And so, but they said, like, I was negotiating. They wanted me to come near, and I was like, I don't know. Let me think about it or whatever. So I'm praying about it. Immediately, God is like, job number two. And so I'm like, well, hold on now, God, because this is less money. Like, did you see it? So I prayed about it again, like literally 6 times. I took this thing to God, like, which job should I take? Every single time, He was like, job number two. Every time, like I wrote it down. Like, let me write it down because you don't see the numbers. Like, let me show you. And so now, mind you, I'm talking about $1.50, something like that, somewhere in that ballpark. And so so he always maintained every time job number two. And so I'm like, I'm pissed, honestly. I'm mad. I'm like, I want the money. And so so I'm mad about it or whatever. But I, again, I don't know why I be saying this sometimes, but I was in a season where I was like, I'm practicing radical obedience to God. So He said to take the job. So I took it, but I was mad about it. I'm talking about I had an attitude about it. Like, I was just like, I was too mad. And so I took the job. And so I'm working at job number two. And I started in September. December of the same year, starting in September 2017, December of the same year, job number one does a huge layoff. They get sued by the government or something for violating government practices and lose millions and millions of dollars. I'm like they lost a lawsuit for like hundreds of millions of dollars. So they do this massive layoff, right? But me, I'm prideful. Like, is you praying? Pray for me. So I'm prideful. So I'm like, nah, you know what I'm saying? I'm a monster at my job whenever I get them. And so I wouldn't have been laid off because I would have been too good. Like they would have kept me, you know what I'm saying? They would have kept me out of everybody that they laid off. That wouldn't have happened to me. And so that was December. Started job number two in September. December they did a mass layoff. April of the next year, the entire company closed nationwide. Everywhere. They had little satellite companies. They had branches in here in Texas and California, like everywhere they had companies everywhere. And all of them, the entire company closed. Doors closed. Done. Finished. And so I was like, shocked, right? And so then, of course, like I'm in my worship, like, God, you're amazing. You know all things, and you cover all things, and you are the Alpha and Omega, right? Because my tone have changed, because I was still like side eyeing God, like, So that was April, right? July of the next year, I get a promotion. And I get a $10,000 raise for an annual raise. So that was like, I think it came out to like about $5. So double the money, triple. I don't even know the money that I was gonna get from the other job. Like with less than a year, like God gave it back with more money on top of it, right? So I'm like, oh, back in worship, you are the awesome God. All the things. And so now I'm happy, right? Like now I'm satisfied. But if I didn't obey God in that moment, like I would have been laid off with everybody else. Like the Bible says the steps of a righteous man are ordered by God. And so it's like even though I didn't want to do it, like I allowed for my steps to be ordered, and because of my obedience, it saved me a bunch of heartache. Like I don't know what would have happened. Like would I have been able to come back to this job? Like at that point, if I had gotten laid off, I would have been in struggle mode, right? So like now I gotta take any job that comes my way because I don't have a job. And so then that changes the position that I'm in, right? So like God put me in a position to where I didn't have to struggle and be looking and be stressed about not having a job because I thought that I would have made it through that December layoff, but he showed me in April like you wouldn't have made it through the company closure. Like it ain't no set of good that you think that you are that will allow for you to have come out of the company being closed. And so even in my attitude, right? Because I definitely had an attitude. Even in my attitude, like God still blessed me to end up getting a promotion and did exceedingly and above what I was expecting of the other role to provide. And so I was grateful for that. And then so I got that raise and promotion. And then less than a year later, I got another $10,000 raise. And then probably like a $15,000 raise, like, and it just kept going and going and going. And so today, I'm like triple. Like I'm still at the same company. My income is like triple what I started when God initially told me to come and take this job. So my point of today podcast is like there is a cost associated with your obedience and your disobedience. And are you willing to sacrifice what that could cost you? Are you willing to sacrifice the job that you could have and the future that you can have, and even kingdom based, like if God is telling you to speak to someone and speak life into that person, like, and you skip that, what is the cost that's associated with that? What is the cost that is associated? What if that person is gonna go home and do something to themselves? God forbid, commit suicide. I wasn't a pal. I was a peacemaker. Yeah, I was a peacemaker in high school, and they did this workshop for us. And in that workshop, they read a story about a guy that committed suicide in California. He jumped from the bridge. I think it's in San Francisco, maybe. But in his letter, he wrote, "I'm gonna walk 2 miles from the San Francisco Bridge today. I mean, two. I'm gonna walk 2 miles to the San Francisco Bridge today. And if one person smiles at me, then I won't jump." And he jumped. And so that story always resonates with me. Like if I make eye contact with someone, I always shoot them a smile. Like every time I think about that, because I'm like, I don't want you to go home and do something to yourself because I didn't smile at you. And so I try to make myself sensitive to the spirit and sensitive to shifts in the atmosphere and in the energy so that I can know, like, how does God want to use me? Because I want to be obedient to that. I want to be obedient to those moves because there's a cost that's associated. Like there's an enemy that seeks to devour us every day, steal, kill, and destroy everything that you've built. Take your life, take your family, separate your family, and distort everything that God has prepared and put in front of us. And there is a cost associated with us not being sensitive to what God says. And so I pray that He continues to impart those things upon me and you, so that we can know and be the best us that we can be. And be the best us in the kingdom that we can be. So, because I think that we can get so caught up in busyness and in finances and in our own plans that we dismiss the things that God is trying to say to us. And so, I pray, God, that you would cover us, Lord. Give us the eyes to see and the ears to hear what you are saying in every season of our lives. I pray that you would make our hearts sensitive to each other and our minds sensitive, Lord. Let us not be so hard by the trials and the tricks of the enemy and of this world, God, that we tune out the love of you for each of us. And so, Lord, give us a heart for your people like you have. Give us the eyes to see your people and love your people the way that you do. Help us to be obedient, Lord, when it's hard. Help us to be obedient, Lord, when it's frustrating. Help us to be obedient, Lord, when we don't understand. Help us to allow our steps to be ordered by you, God, and orchestrated by you, because we know that we can trust every plan that you have put together. You knew us before we were formed in our mother's womb, God. And so you knew every plan that you had. So, Lord, help us to trust your way instead of our way. Help us to trust your plan instead of our plan. Help us to trust in you, God, before and over any and everything. And so, Lord, I thank you and I love you and I honor you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. See you next week, friend.